1, 2, 3. Guide to creating solos. So thanks for joining us. The idea behind this is that we take a melody and we're going to be playing She'll Be Coming Around the Mountain, and if you don't know it, we'll teach it to you. So you take a melody that's, let's say it's already been written. This song has been around for a long time. So you learn how to play that on the instrument, and then you can embellish it in different ways. We're going to talk about that. We'll be looking at ideas of how to embellish it that will also help you to create solos on your own. So if you write tunes, write songs, you'd have some tools now to be able to fill in some gaps and create some different interesting textures rather than just playing single note melodies. So alrighty, so we'll get started. Thanks for joining us. Okay, let's look at the melody for She'll Be Coming Around the Mountain. So we're just going to play the simple melody, all right? One way we can extend the length of the note on a mandolin is to play tremolo. We really don't have sustain on a mandolin, not very much of it, in the same way that a fiddle player or a trumpet player, horn player might have. So since we don't have a whole lot of sustain, the note dies very quickly. So what we can do really is just keep playing the note to add length to it. And tremolo is the way we do that. It's really just repeating pick patterns on the note. Okay, and there are several different speeds you could do that at. I could play quarter notes, which would probably not be fast enough to be considered a tremolo. I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. Those are quarter notes. If I subdivide that and play eighths, 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and then I have eighth notes. So that's a good tremolo. That's a good way to start when you're trying to figure out how fast you can play. The thing about our song She'll Be Coming Around the Mountain is the melody is already in eighth notes. She'll be 1 and 2 and so tremolo doesn't change anything unless we go to a more subdivided pattern with our picking. We need to just basically play it faster and subdivide it more, which means we need 16th notes. So I'm going to have to do what we call 1E and a. You could count it that way. Some people do 1E and a. For 16th notes, for every beat we get 4 notes. 1E and a, 2E and a, right? So you're playing 4 beats for 4 16th notes for every quarter note, right? So it would be, she'll be coming round the... Now another option would be to play triplets, eighth note triplets. So at this point we've got quarter notes, 1, 2, we've got eighth notes, 1 and 2 and, we've got 16th notes, 1E and a, 2E and a. Now we could play eighth note triplets would be between eighth notes and 16th notes in speed. So let's just say I'm doing eighth notes, 1 and 2 and, play triplets I would play 1 and a, 2 and a, 1 and a, 2 and a, 3 and a, 4 and a, okay? So just to show you how the speed would kind of build up and how you could kind of figure out which one you wanted to do, quarter notes, 1, 2, eighths, 1 and 2 and triplets, 1 and a 2 and a 16th, 16th notes right there. Okay, so I can determine which one I want by really how fast I can play. I don't always have to play the fastest one, but that's how you figure that out. Okay. Okay, let's look at some common embellishments. These are some things that can add just a little bit of interesting texture to what you're doing without changing the melody a whole lot. And these would be slides, hammer-ons, and pull-offs, and we'll look at each one separately. A slide is just, as the name would imply, you're just sliding into whatever your note you want to play. I'm shooting for a melody note of G. She will be coming right there. I'm going to slide into it from the 4th fret. Why would I choose that? Well, if I'm in sort of a bluesy mode, I can pick the flat 7, but that might be a little weird, okay? At this point, the melody is just pretty, what we call diatonic. It sort of stays in the key of G, so I'll pick sort of a fairly benign note, which will be the F sharp, just to slide into the G, okay? And so on and so forth. You just pick the melody note you want and just find the next closest place to slide. If I want to slide into the B note here, if I actually want to slide and not hammer, I have to grab this note back here, because if I grab it open, that becomes a hammer, which we're going to talk about as well. In other words, if you literally want to slide, I have to slide. I don't have any choice but to slide from the 1st fret to the 2nd. Okay. All right. So I'll just play the tune through using slides as embellishments wherever I can. Alright, so let's look at hammer-ons. Very similar to the sound of a slide, and that's where we're going to take one note and hammer into another one by using a different finger. So if I were to hammer this note here, I'm shooting for an E note here, for example. I'm going to play it open, and I'm going to hammer into it. Okay. If I'm shooting for this note, which is G, and I want to hammer into it, I'm going to play my middle finger on the 4th fret and hammer with my ring finger. So it's a similar sound, but it's a little harder sound. Here's hammer, here's slide. You can actually hear the slide moving across the fret. It's a little smoother sound. So it just kind of depends on what you're looking for sound-wise, and sometimes it just depends on where your left hand is, and can I hammer it or am I not going to be able to. We talked in slides about how if I'm playing this note as a B note, if I'm going to slide, I have no choice but to slide here. Well, that note is outside the scale. That's a B flat. We're in the key of G. So that's a blues note. Well, maybe you don't want that blues note. Maybe you want to play an A note, which is in the key. It's in the G scale, right? It's diatonic. So that might determine how you know, whether you pick a slide or a hammer. So in this case, let's say I want the A. Well, then I can hammer into the B note. So those are the kinds of decisions you make there as to whether you play slides or hammers. Okay. Alright, so I am going to play the tune now using hammer-ons wherever I can. Okay, another embellishment that we can use that's related to hammer-ons and slides is the pull-off. It's almost like the opposite of a hammer-on. So when I play the 3rd string open, for example, I can hammer into an E note there, and I could also do the opposite and pull it off. Right, so I'm pulling from an E to a D rather than hammering D to E. Right? You want to be able to actually pull that string down, and even without using my pick, get plenty of noise out of that string by pulling it down and letting your fingernail kind of catch part of it, almost like it's a little pick. All right. So I pluck the 1st note with my pick, and then I'm pulling that with my left hand. So I can pull 8th notes or quarter notes, and as I play, she'll be coming around the mountain. Sometimes I will embellish with 8th notes. right? So I can pull off eighth notes that way. All right, and sometimes I'll just pull them as quarter notes. So here's the tune. So let's look at the concept of a drone note. It's similar to the idea of tremolo, where we're filling in the spaces. We're not just playing quarter note melody notes. In this case, we took a tremolo and we added eighth notes, but we played the same note. In other words, if I play a melody note, I'm tremoloing the same note. With the drone, we're going to play a different note. At the same time, we're playing eighth notes. All right, so I'm playing. This is my melody note. Well, what I want to do is grab some other note. Well, I'm usually just going to try to find the easiest one to play, or the easiest one to make a chord with. So if I have my big G shape here, I'm going to look for a note in the chord first. All right, it's not, you don't always have to do that, but it's going to end up being the best thing to try at least first. In this case, here's my melody note G. I'm going to look for the B, just start going down the line. In this case, that works out pretty well, okay? If I have an open drone note, that's ideal. We just don't really have one in G other than the fourth string here, but we want to drone the treble in. In other words, if I'm playing a melody note here, I don't want to drone a note up above it, or a bass note, a note that's bassier. So I want to try to grab a note above it. That's just a general rule. You could do it, you could drone here, but usually the bassy note will kind of take over and be a little bit too, it'll just stick out too much and take away from the melody. So I'm looking for a B note here. That's just what I'm going to go with. And so as I play through, let's just say I go to the B note as a melody note. I'm going to then grab the G note. So remember, I'm looking for a note in the chord. And then the melody of this tune goes to a D note. And use the same note. So if I'm working through the tune, here, there's really not that much to grab. In other words, when I'm playing these melody notes in between, really all I've got really is an open A, and that's just not going to work because, again, it's not in the G chord. So when I go back up, let's see, here I am. I'm going to play that just like a tremolo. When I get to B, again, I'm going to use G as a drone then. So D, I can use the same G drone note. Now I'm playing an A note, but I'm still in the key of G, playing over a G chord, so I can use my G note still as a drone even over the A note. These are the kinds of things we're looking for, right? Because they're easy to kind of manage. So, now right there, I'm probably just going to play a single G melody note and then go to a melody note of A. Well, there it's changing to a D chord. So I'm just going to look for a D chord. Maybe it looks like that. Well, I already know what the shape is. I don't need this up here, so I'm just going to voice it right here. Right? And then I'm back here to my melody. Probably going to play those as just as straight ahead quarter notes. I could drone all of that, but at some point it might be a little much, and you could just kind of make a decision about that. And then I'm going to the melody note here. Here it's going to change to a C chord. There's my melody note. So I'm going to make a C chord here, and that's going to be my drone. And then here the melody goes to A. That's just going to be a little bit of it's going to be a little more trouble for me to just jump to that note and try to find another drone note that fast. So I probably just won't do it. So, right. Now I could, if you want to get complicated about it, you could drone a G. But you can see it gets a little tricky. So if you're a more advanced player, you could try that. For my purposes, I'm just going to bail on it. Now I'm back to a G chord. So I have a D note, but I don't. The next note that's available to me that's not on the same string is going to be that B note again. Okay. Even though I'm playing you remember we played G and our drone note was B. Well, now it's D. But I want to play a drone note that's on a separate string, so I don't want to play a G that's on the same string. That kind of doesn't get the sound we want, because we want it to be smooth, both notes ringing against each other, ringing at the same time. So as I reach for the D note, I'm going to drone that with a B note that way. Okay, these are just some ideas to kind of get you going. And at this point, we've got probably there. I'm not going to drone anything. I'm almost at the end of the race here, so I'm just going to probably play straight quarter notes there. Okay, so now I'll play the whole tune through, and again, to show you an example of how it sounds in context with it all together. Okay, let's talk about neighboring notes. This is a really cool way to still keep the melody fairly intact and add a little bit of interest. And what we're going to do with neighboring notes is, the name would imply, if you play a G note, for example, I'm going to play a neighboring note, F sharp. You could play either half steps or whole steps, but sometimes, usually if you're playing coming from above the note down, in other words, let's say I'm playing from a C note to a B. Okay, that's going to work pretty well. If you play chromatically, in other words, if you play the half step down on some notes, here's G, that's a G sharp, that's going to be a little out, it's going to be a little rough to do that. You're usually going to be okay, if you want to just think of a sort of a hard rule to follow, if you're coming from below the note. You can usually pretty much always get away with that. Coming from above the note, it's going to be a little bit outside for any kind of roots music at least. Now, as long as it's in the key, we're in the key of G here. If you're playing a note that's in the key, you're always okay. In other words, if I'm going to play a half step above B here, I'm playing C. That just happens to be the way the G scale works out. There's a half tone between those notes. You can target a note in the scale anytime. You're always going to get away with that. Again, just as a default position, kind of a safe place to be, come from beneath it. Okay. All right. So if I'm on G, I can play below it or above it. Okay. And I can play chromatically. If I'm on a B note, I can play. But I also can play. I can play a whole step away or a half step away. That's really the rule. Okay. So I can play A and then a whole step away. That's really just the next note of the scale, A down. In other words, I can play half step away or whole step away. Okay. So I could go. And then just to show you once more with G, there's half step away, there's whole step away, here is half step away above, and again that can be a little tricky, so watch out for that. Okay. Alright, so now I'm going to play the tune and use the concept of neighboring notes. Let's look at cross-picking. For a more detailed discussion of this, you can check out the Mandolin Player's Practical Guide to Scales and Arpeggios. The book and DVD goes into a lot of detail about it. What we're really doing, the way we define cross-picking is if we play 3 strings or more. So if I'm playing 2 strings, I'm not cross-picking, but if I play 3 or more, there's 3, 4, we call that cross-picking. And it's really a great way of really playing the arpeggio, the notes that make up a chord. You know, I can just play a G chord, all right, and I can play almost like a banjo roll. That's the way they usually are going to function. And the way we're going to put things together with this song is we're going to put it in a style that I attribute to a great mandolin player named Jesse McReynolds, who really used cross-picking a lot. And he was not afraid to use open ringing notes that were not necessarily in the chord. In other words, if I play a G chord here, there's my full G chord. I can leave this first finger off, leave the rest of it the same. I'm leaving this pinky off here, I'm not playing the 4th string, and I am leaving then the E string open. So I'm just playing the G here and the B here, and this E is open. So that ringing E note is still in the key of G, still in the scale, and it just creates a really kind of interesting sound. And so sometimes he would do that. The roll that he used is, or one of the main rolls he used was down, up, up. So if I play strings 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, that's down, up, up, down, up, up. Now I'm going to take that G note off the bottom. Kind of sounds like an E minor because that's really what it is. You could call it an E minor or a G6, G major 6, because of that E note in there is the 6th note of the scale. All right, and then you also have 2 strings here that are in the key of G. They're not in the D is in the chord, but the A is not. You can also drone them. Again, it's okay to have those sort of extensions ringing. So a lot of times what we can do is play in this part of the neck, which might be a little bit weird for you, but starting on a D note here. So instead of playing a D note open on the 3rd string, I'm fretting it at the 7th fret here, and I can begin my melody. And then I can play my roll. Okay? So that's the basic concept of how you are going to cross pick, and then everything else that fills in the gaps between those areas where you can't cross pick will be that will be the toggle. So in other words, if I'm playing a melody note, those are quarter notes, that won't really fit into my roll all that well because my roll has 3 notes in it. It's a 3-note roll. And so I got 2 quarter notes I'm trying to deal with. I just want to catch the melody and not have to make things complicated. So the way I'm going to do that, there's my roll. I'm going to drone. I'm going to drone the 2nd string. Just because if I drone this one, it's too close to this melody note and it sounds a little weird. I'm going to drone the A as my toggle. Okay. Alright, so now I'll play the tune using the cross-picking style along with drone notes to fill in the gaps.